Let's hear from Cornwall Museums Partnership, who did a really different piece of work with us that was much more about their organisation and inclusion within their own processes. So, hello, Celine Elliott.
Hi there, thank you for having me. I hope everyone can hear me okay. That was really interesting to hear, and complete contrast in every respect, I suppose, to the work we did, but we also had a really positive outcome. So in brief, Cornwall Museums Partnership is a charity which has been around for about 5 years now. It developed out of the need that was identified to develop and make the most of the potential of museums in Cornwall. So we work with about 70 plus museums and galleries across the whole of Cornwall. Some of it's in a very focused way, some of it is more broad brush. Ourselves as an organisation were part of this as much as our partnership was. But the focus of the work was specifically with 7 museum partners, key partners, and together we convene a group which is funded by Arts Council England. And I was really interested in how we could address the issues that I'd become aware over the previous 12 months to do with diversity and inclusion, specifically in respect to recruitment. So we, through this network of 7 partners, have developed a number of different programs aimed at diversifying the workforce. So they exist and they are successful. However, what I had become aware of was that the recruitment process of that program was problematic, in my opinion. So there was a layer there, and then there was also obviously the learning that I was hoping we could take for Cornwall Museums Partnership for our recruitment processes. So the approach we took with the Inclusivity Project was we had 2 online workshops. So the first workshop that was run, and we did a lot of work preparation beforehand with Lucy, a member of the team. So she was really helpful in drawing out why we thought we needed to do this work. So this was with me and another colleague. The background, she needed the context of what we did. It was really thoughtfully brought together. And then what we did was we introduced the Inclusivity Project to our 7 partners. And the first workshop was very much about sharing their experiences. We looked at 3 key questions throughout. So the first question was, what does workplace diversity and inclusion mean for our small museum community? The second question was, what are some of the opportunities and challenges that the small museums face with regard to implementing the measures that can help to foster inclusion and diversity? So trying to, it was a real process of sharing and gaining trust. And there was a lot there that we had to do with the partners to make sure they felt they could share not just the successes, but also the challenges, and be honest. And then finally, what were the potential solutions for enhancing diversity and inclusion in workplace practices in our small museums and galleries and in our own organisation, our own charity. And we have 12 members of staff, not all of whom are full-time. So our capacity isn't huge for this. So they were half-day events, and the first one took place in May. Obviously, we'd initially planned to do it all face-to-face, and we had to pivot to online, but it was done really well. I thought it was really beneficial, and it didn't feel like a problem to the project at all. So I would totally recommend doing that. Obviously, everything's better face-to-face, but we know where we are. So after the first session, which I said was about sharing what we knew, best practice, then that was followed up by an online survey, and that invited the 7 partners to feedback their good practice and to also start to tease out and to highlight any barriers or challenges that might have arisen in the past. And this, I think, was a really key sort of thing, because obviously everybody wants to tell you what's great, but it's harder sometimes to share the things that happen, especially around diversity and inclusion, and the backdrop of Black Lives Matters is happening. We're in Cornwall, so we know that we struggle with certain elements of diversity and inclusion, but that's not an excuse and it's not good enough. So we need to kind of really make the most of what we have got. But that online survey, I think, really helped people share a bit more. And of course, they'd met some of the Inclusivity Project team and they knew what we were working towards at this point. And then the findings from the discussions and the survey was summarised, and they informed the design of the second workshop. So it wasn't that we fixed it in place and then we just doggedly stuck to it. It was quite an organic process. As I said, it was very sensitively done. And the findings also acted as a stimulus for eliciting a series of aspirations for the enhanced sort of diversity and inclusion elements. But we were in constant contact with the team at the Inclusivity Project, you know, tweaking and, you know, developing who did we think might be useful to bring in. We all had different contacts. And of course, the experience of the team was invaluable. What might be helpful to add at this point is that there is a nuance between our relationship with our partners. So in terms of the, I've just had a question there, the workshop was online, by the way. There was a nuance in our relationship with the directors of these museums. So there's relationship issues between them, and then there's also between us. Having that third party sort of representation from the Inclusivity Project was really key to the success of this. So we knew things about the partners and the partner know things about each other, but the way it was handled and contextualized with somebody who has, you know, hasn't got a dog in the museum fight, so to speak, they just want to improve the key aspects that we'd highlighted was really helpful. And I think help people leave some of their egos behind and, you know, be a bit more frank and honest about it. And that just comes from the experience of the team. So in the second workshop, once we'd highlighted some of those issues, those barriers and the successes, we brought in, or rather the team brought in 2 speakers. So one was a Cornish-based representative from the Beacon Project who has loads of experience about what it's like to work in Cornwall and what can be achieved in terms of improving diversity and inclusion. And then somebody else was from the museum sector who again specialises in this field. So very different, but they shared their insights on best practice and the available resources to try and support the museums in improving their diversity and inclusion. So the last of the speakers left the group with the question, what is your model of change and how will you implement it? So that took us into that third question, that what are the potential solutions? And that's what we sought to address by developing the list of the aspirations for the small museums, which has been part of the outcomes. So during that final workshop, the museum representatives deliberated and discussed a number of different options for addressing the existing challenges. So how practical would they be within our organisations and within the context of Cornwall? And the ambition was to construct a list of these aspirations, which were broad enough that we could share the learning. There's a lot of what my organisation does is sharing learning with smaller organisations, but which are also an honest reflection of the experience of the participants. So it's no good pretending that we can do this easily. It's a long-term commitment, but it does pay off. And we felt confident that they could be adopted and adapted by organisations according to their specific context. For example, where they are geographically, in terms of governance, which is very key to charities, and the institutional approach they have and their circumstances and needs. And there's been I think there's going to be long-term sort of fruits born from this approach, but I actually have some, I don't want to call them easy wins because they're not easy wins, they're just recent. So yesterday, CMP, my organisation, closed our recent round of recruitment for 3 board members. And I would honestly say that CMP has been targeted and been sensitive and been aware in its approaches to recruiting for our board. So this is going to the governance level in the past, but we really focused on all the learning we took from the Inclusivity Project this time. Specifically for us, we were interested in around improving representation in terms of the ethnic makeup of our board. So previously we've had an all-white board, and we know we're in Cornwall, we understand that, but we can go broader than that, we can be bigger than that, and we can also get to know our communities a bit more. And we also wanted more representation from the under 30s within our board. And I know some people are targeting different areas, but that for us was a key area. And I've just found out this morning that we had 22 applications for those 3 positions, which is almost unheard of, and 9 of those applications actually hit those targets. So for us, that is a huge success, to be a really small charity in Cornwall, and actually to know if we've applied the learning which we were able to gather from the Inclusivity Project, we were part of the way. Now we have to recruit from that, and fingers crossed everything goes well, but that's brilliant. As we were just saying in a meeting before I joined you, that's a massive win to us, to shifted the dial from where we were, where people are saying you can't recruit in this way, blah, 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 which is what we've heard a lot of, to actually we know we're at least part of the way there, and we'll just keep going with this approach. And the meeting I had this morning to talk about what we do next is obviously we need to shortlist from those applications for the board. However, we know that even if we only can recruit 3 at this point, because we have positions coming up every year where people have served their time on our board, and so we need to re-recruit, we can seek to develop members from that cohort and say, so we might recruit 3 this year, but those next 2, they might come into post next year. And so we know we can actually build on this and continue to develop it. And yeah, that's massive thanks to the Inclusivity Project. That's a huge result. And I know that once we get through this, fingers crossed, hopefully successful round of recruiting, we're going to be sharing some blogs about what we've learned and how we can apply that. So yeah, big fresh thank you from CMP on that respect.
It's so gratifying to hear, and we're so proud of the work that you did and all of the effort that you put into developing that aspect of your organisation too.
I want to say as well that it was incredibly skillfully managed from the Inclusivity Project, because what isn't always apparent, nor would it or should it be, is that museum directors are quite difficult to work with. So they've got a huge responsibility. They're often working with very tight budgets, with not much time, with tiny teams, and there's just massive pressure, especially in the context of this year and lockdown and all the implications there. And it was really well managed, and it was not easy at all. But yeah, you know, issues that have been bubbling away for a year or 2, which we hadn't been able to find the context to manage because of our relationships with the partners, were really advanced through the process. So it was brilliant timing and brilliantly done.
That's fantastic to hear. And what really strikes me about these examples and about your description of the process, Celine, by contrast to the process that Richard went through, is exactly what's so hard for us to communicate to you businesses about what we do, which is that we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach to our business engagement. You come with the ideas and we create a process that fits your needs. And that might sound confusing or vague, but when you hear it in the context of these 2 different examples, you can see exactly why that has to be the case and how that can work to your advantage.
Yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend working with a team, because they're just so hugely experienced at working actually globally in a number of different contexts, that it's just a massively intelligent bunch of people with huge skill sets. So why wouldn't you benefit from having their take and their approach on you? It was brilliant for us in that respect. And there was a question I've just seen pop up there about, from Sandra, did you lose any board members due to change? We lose board members on a rolling basis because they only serve, I think it's 3 years, the term that we ask people to serve, and that keeps things moving. It feels like a healthy governance structure. Some organisations, some museums don't do that. They can have board members in for years. That can work, but in terms of best practice, I think it's better to have that rolling. It keeps things moving. Was there resistance, and how did you mitigate? There's always resistance, and I have a brilliant CEO in my organisation called Amy Kell, who is of course guided by the board, but actually what's key to our board success is the chair. The chair of our board is really an expert at managing that, and resistance is good. I know people say resistance is futile, but resistance is actually good. It's the grit that makes the pearl. So yeah, I've had all sorts of things said to me by board members. You know, the classic is museums are neutral, which is laughable because museums are far from neutral. They're hugely political with a small p. And you know, at the minute they're in the thick of the debate about Black Lives Matters, and you know, they've been weaponized by, you know, racists for a long time. So we're far from neutral organizations, and we need to be political in our actions. So it's really important that we forefront diversity and inclusion. And CMP, my organisation, is funded in part to demonstrate leadership. So I think we need to be really clear about that to our, you know, we're sympathetic to what the directors of small museums are managing in terms of their board relationships, their stakeholders, and just the realities of running small organisations. But we have to be really firm about why diversity and inclusion matters and how you can advance that. And like I said, I'm through with excuses about diversity and inclusion in Cornwall. We can actually lead the way on this. We can really be ambitious and say, well, if we can do this, then actually anyone can do this, but this is how we've done it. And I mean, the clue's in our title. We're Cornwall Museums Partnership. We work in partnership, and collaborating with organisations like the Inclusivity Project is a really good example of that's how you make the difference. You're not going to do it all yourself. You can't, nobody can. So we have to be resourceful and make use of our resources, but our partners are part of that.